So this is a visual essay where I will be talking about why the Vita failed. Now I've done a series of these videos before, but recently people have been believing the bullshit statement that the reason the Vita failed was due to smartphones. That is incorrect. That is incorrect. And I'll state the reasons why. So let's get into it after the cut. The reasons that we're here, the reasons that we feel our loved ones disappear. Just fucking around with you. The reasons that the Vita failed are diverse. There's like 3 of them majorly, but none of which are related to smartphones. And I'll give you the reasons why, starting with reason number 1. The first reason, which is basically the Vita was created to aim for a market that wasn't there for them at that time. See, basically the Vita was created to be a higher cost, higher powered alternative to the 3DS, okay? Nintendo's handheld at the time. Because Nintendo's always had a handheld for a lower tier market, like a casualized lower tier market. With some specialization for particular genres, right? And as long as Nintendo's had a handheld like that, there's always been the higher tier offerings, which normally cost as much as a normal console of the time. So basically, that was a market that didn't really exist. Yeah, you had a few people who had, Game Gears and Sega Nomads and Neo Geo Pockets and Atari Lynxes. But generally speaking, the lower tier option, whatever Nintendo's handheld was, always was like the market leader when it came to handhelds. Why? Because basically, I just answered it for you. Essentially, the audience for a hardcore gaming experience on the go was pretty much not there. Like, or at least it wasn't there. It wasn't a large enough audience for it to be really profitable. Okay. And that's just the way it is. I mean, I know some people are going to get upset when they hear that, but that's the way it was. Like I think the Atari Lynx maybe sold 4 million units. So the people who had an Atari Lynx wanted that hardcore, higher spec handheld gaming experience. But I mean, like, do people want to spend $350 for that at the time? Like, if you just for inflation, it's like $399, $400. That's the price of a console. You could have bought a home console for that price. Yeah, it wouldn't have been portable, but you would have gotten more games out of it. So that's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is coming up after the cut. So basically, one of the bigger reasons that the Vita failed was the pricing. The Vita, when it launched, was you had 2 SKUs. You had the Wi-Fi version, and then you had the 3G version, which had a better data bandwidth for when you were downloading shit. And basically, but those were the prices up front. Then you have to factor in the price of the data plan, and the memory cards. So basically, a 8 gig memory stick for the Vita, like the lowest tier one, was like $35. Okay, so you factor in the data plan and $35, you're paying basically $300 for the lower tier version, $350. You could have gotten a PS3 bundle with 2 or 3 games for that same price. All right. And that helps bring that helped bring the console down. I mean, the handheld down. The argument that people are like, well, smartphones. Here's the thing, okay? The people who are playing those types of games, the people who are like, man, I'm gonna play, I want a handheld. like the audience for that is not necessarily going to be the same audience who, who wants to play dedicated handheld gaming is not going to be the same audience that's going to have a smartphone, right? If you're talking about parents, parents aren't going to go, like typically speaking, when you think of handheld, it's for kids. Parents aren't going to go and spend $350 or $300 on a handheld just so their kid can play dedicated games. Okay, they're not. Okay, like that's something that adults and teenagers are going to do. Okay, I want this handheld, right? If you're talking about little kids, like nowadays, their parents are just going to give them a tablet or a fucking smartphone, right? But the market for that isn't going to be the Vita crowd. All right, it was never going to be the Vita crowd. And if anyone tells you that, they're full of shit. Which leads to the third reason that the Vita failed after the cut. So ultimately, I mean, the most important thing for any dedicated gaming device are the games. Because ultimately, you can have the most badass handheld gaming device ever, or console or whatever. If you don't have games to go with it, programs, what's the fucking point? The Vita did not have a great library. Aside for an ultra niche audience for certain types of games like dating sims, labyrinth games. I'm playing a PC port of a Vita game right now. Labyrinth of Refrain. Like that's not what the Vita is about. That's not what the Vita had no like you can't ask a GP, a general purpose person who doesn't have a Vita, okay, what were some notable games for the Vita? They can't fucking tell you because there are none. Okay? There are no games for the Vita where people are like, man, this is a reason to own a Vita. They can't. Like general, general purpose, gamer. Now, you can do this, you can say that there are certain games that, people would say, okay, this is a reason to own a Nintendo handheld. You might say, okay, well, Pokemon, Mario, Legend of Zelda, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You get what I'm saying? There's always something worth having for the system. Animal Crossing, shit, if you're an RPG nut, there are RPGs you can say, well, that's a reason to own the system. There's not really that type of thing going on with the Vita. And the games that were noteworthy for the system have mostly been ported to the PlayStation. So you have very little reason or impetus to own it for the PlayStation. So you get what I'm saying? The Vita was just a big bundle of failure. But smartphones didn't have anything to do with it. Now, for those people who have a counter argument, well, smartphones, I will entertain your counter argument after the cut. So the counter argument for this is smartphone games hurt the handheld gaming industry. That is true. However, Sony has never been the forefront or the leader of the handheld industry. The leader of the handheld industry has been Nintendo for years. All right. And for Joe Blow average consumer, parents who want their kids to have something to play just to shut them up for 20 or 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours. Yes, for those people, that's dedicated handheld time. That's the DS, the 3DS, the Game Boy Advance. Those people aren't buying, handhelds like they used to back in the day. But that's not the same audience as, say, the Vita crowd. They're two completely different crowds. Okay, they're two completely different audiences. And if anyone tells you that they aren't, they're full of shit. They're lying to you. All right. So what does this mean? Okay, why do people like to say that smartphones hurt the Vita? Why is that argument made? Well, it basically boils down to it's easier than stating the simple fact that Sony did not support the console. Okay, Sony basically gave it 2 years and they put garbage ass games on it that really had nothing, that really didn't add anything to the system. Um, and the one notable game that I can remember being on the Vita was Gravity Rush, which they then ported to the PC. Like almost every, it's not the PC, to the PS4. Like almost every game, and I think Gravity Rush, the first one, was also ported to the PS3. Almost every game that was on the Vita that was notable was also ported to Sony's home console. So what's the fucking point of owning the Vita? Like there was never any compelling reason to own a Vita, okay? Like Sony was like, well, it's got remote play. Okay, that's cool, I guess. It's not really a really storied reason to own this system. They were like, well, it interfaces. You can use it as a second controller. That another dumbass reason to spend $300 on a handheld. You know, at the end of the day, it came down to support and the competition, which kicked the Vita's ass. Okay, and that's why the Vita failed. The argument that it was smartphones is bullshit. And if anyone tells you that it was smartphones that caused the Vita to fail, they're lying to you. It's total and complete bullshit. So tell me what you think. We'll wrap things up in the conclusion after the cut. So let's get to the conclusion. Basically, here's why the Vita failed. All right. It was marketed towards an audience that really wasn't there in large enough numbers to really make it profitable. Second reason, it just cost too goddamn much for for it to reach a more casual audience that would have bought it in high enough numbers to make it profitable. And finally, the Vita failed because basically, it got its lunch eaten by the 3DS. So, but none of these reasons are really smartphones. And if anyone tells you the reason the Vita failed is because of smartphones, it's bullshit. The only handheld that was affected by smartphone usage is the Nintendo's handhelds. That's it. And I mean, and here's the thing: while Nintendo was affected by handhelds, they still managed to have a very successful console. I mean, a very successful handheld that made money. So, I mean, if Nintendo could make money off of the 3DS in the age of smartphones, then there's no reason why no one else could have made money. It's a bullshit statement. The only reason people say that is because the only reason Sony says that, well, it's because of smartphones, is because it's easier than telling the truth, which is that Sony abandoned the console and we're expecting third parties to put the money and time and energy behind it to make it into a profitable system. And that was just not a smart move, okay? You can't expect third parties to support a handheld. You can't. Or actually not just a handheld, any console. The only platform where third parties really make up the vast majority of its support is the PC. That's it. That's the only handheld that has that going on. Like no other handheld does that shit. No other platform is made up for that type of thing. So with that being said, that's the end of this video. Remember to rate, comment, share, subscribe. This Saturday we will be doing a sci-fi power hour-ish with on some stuff. And this Sunday will be BS Busters, so look forward to that. Both of these happen at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, so peace.